Welcome, everybody. We are having an ableism panel today with the support of many organizations. We have the Green Mountain Self Advocates. We have support through Green Mountain Support Services. Green Mountain Support Services, Lamoille County Mental Health. We have had the help with Rachel for our CLC grant. And am I missing any organizations? No? Okay.
Green Mountain Access TV.
Green Mountain Access TV, thank you for coming and recording in the library too, yes. So today's panel is on ableism, and we will be asking our panel what that means for them, how that interacts with them, and learning more about how we can support differently and meet each person's needs individually. So I want to thank them all for being here. I appreciate everyone taking the time to do this, and I look forward to learning more. Thank you.
All right. So what we do is, first of all, thank you for having us. So what we do is we begin some of our panels or trainings or workshops or whatever you call them by collecting stories, and we've been collecting stories from people who live in Vermont, and these are people with disabilities. And there are examples of the words and actions that we face every day. We find that the words and actions of others impact our lives more than our disabilities, and we are just going to take turns reading comments, and we will not discuss what we hear. So your job is just to listen as we read the comments. So what's going to happen is a backpack of rocks is going to be passed around, and in the backpack are the rocks, and each rock has a comment on it, and people take a rock out of the bag, read it, and pass the bag on to the next person, and just continue to do that until there's no more rocks in the bag, obviously.
And I've got the bag.
And I have the entertainment.
What if someone said you could not have sex or even hold hands with the person you love?
My disability causes my hands to be twisted, but I still want to write things down on paper or handle my own money. I just need extra time to do this, but everyone grabs things from my hands and does it for me.
What if people stare at you all the time because of the way you look?
What if you were told you could not have pets?
There are times I feel I should be perfect at everything and that there is no room for error. It's like living in a world where people without disabilities can make mistakes, but people with disabilities can't.
What if you were 54 years old and you were told when to go to bed?
When I show my emotions or tell people how I feel, I get more meds.
Keep going.
They told me I could never go to college. Why not? I have dreams too.
people care about me and want me to protect me, and I appreciate that, but I don't want to be protected from living my life.
I want to see my girlfriend on Friday night, but no one will take me. Why do I only get to spend time with her during the week at public places like bingo?
My friend Shirley is having her birthday party at a restaurant that does not have a ramp. I reminded her that I can't get in. The place is not acceptable for me. Shirley decided to have the party there anyway.
I am 42. I love my family, but living at home with them at my age takes a toll on my self-esteem.
I stutter and people just answer for me. I just need time to answer.
They took my kids away because they said I had a disability and I wasn't able to raise them.
Whispering about me, I can still hear you, whether or not I'm able to tell you with words.
When someone asks me a question, and while I am thinking of my answer, somebody decides for me.
I bounced another check. Now my case manager is threatening to take my checkbook away from me.
So some say having a disability is a burden, but we encourage people to be proud of who they are, and that includes having a disability. The real burden is the words and actions of others, and that's what weighs us down. So, any thoughts on what you heard?
Powerful.
Say more.
It's powerful to hear the stories I hear of people who need to have the rights of everyone else and clearly don't. And it hurts my heart.
Anybody else?
I just found it really sad.
Uh-huh.
Powerful.
I think that sometimes we take for granted what people who aren't in marginalized groups have as privileges.
I also think it's clear that we still have a lot of work to do for all people to have the same thing in life. We have the same rights.
Uh-huh.
And if we have, we'll introduce ourselves in a minute, but you know, we have lots of different mottos and themes, and I think one of the more popular ones is "We want what you got." You know, it just kind of wraps it all up and says it all. So, anybody else that didn't have a chance to speak? Anything else that comes to mind when you?
I had my children taken away because of my disability.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about you, Lori, but that was hitting hard. Yeah, when that one was read.
And I can vouch that not every place is wheelchair accessible, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Or it's only one step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless anybody else has anything they'd like to share. You heard the word ableism mentioned. That's the name of this event, and it was in the name of this event. And one way to define ableism is discrimination against people with disabilities. And ableism means that people with disabilities as a group are treated unfairly because of our disabilities. And I guess my question is, I'm just curious to know, when you hear the word ableism, what comes to mind? I know I said some, but why?
When I hear the word ableism, I think that assuming something about a person with a disability. Without knowing them, you make certain assumptions about their capabilities, what they can do and can't do.
I think personally that ableism is a little known term, unfortunately. And here's a classic example. My husband, Patrick's dad, has lived with Patrick for 32 years and is about as supportive and endorsing as it comes. But he said, "You're doing a panel on what?" I was like, I don't think ableism is a real well-known term out there, unfortunately.
I was labeled in school as mental retardation and put in special ed until that teacher said, "You don't belong here," and they put me in regular school or regular classroom.
When I think of ableism, I feel the feeling, and what I kind of see it is putting anybody in a box and saying, these are your limits.
I think of ableism in a couple of ways. I think of what a lot of people are talking about is like personal, interpersonal, like judging somebody or assuming something about an individual, discriminating. And then I also think about it as more of a systems thing. And I think about in all the different social justice movements that disability justice, I have learned needs to be in front. In a sense that needs to come first, that if we're gonna be inclusive, and we start there, it will help get more people under this umbrella of justice. That if we plan an event and we don't plan on making the font big enough for people to read, or if we don't have interpreters, or if we don't have, any of a number of things, then it's not really inclusive, and that to me is ableist. Not to say I'm exempt of it. Really hard to always be completely inclusive of everyone.
I think we should be able to make our own decisions. I know some people can't, but the ones that can should be able to make their own decisions.
And actually, Lori, as I spend more and more time in the self-advocacy movement, I really have not really met that person that can't make their own decisions. People are always able to indicate what they like or don't like in some way, I mean, think about the people in your life who have disabilities, you know that they love you, they're able to, I always say that sometimes to family members, like, for sure that your kid loves you, and so they're able to communicate that, even if they can't do it necessarily with their words. I do want to just pause for a minute and have us all introduce ourselves. So I'll begin with me. My name is Karen Topper, and I live actually down in Barrie, and I work with Green Mountain Self-Advocates.
Hi, I'm Stone Peebles. I'm a discrimination coordinator for Green Mountain Self-Advocates, and I'm also live in Montpelier.
And you have another job too. You want to talk about that job?
I also work at UVM at St. College Vermont program at the Center on Disability and Community Inclusion. And this is my second job as a discrimination assistant.
I'm Max. I work for Green Mountain Self-Advocates. I'm the outreach director, and I've been doing this job for 16 years.
Laura Jones and I live in Morrisville. I'm a consumer client at Lamoille Developmental Health.
I'm Mary Ann Lewis, AKA Patrick's mom. That's how most of the community knows me. And this is Patrick Lewis, who has his own micro business, Purely Patrick. Very thriving business, right, bud?
Do you want to talk about the business real quickly?
Sure, I'll do some shameless self-promotion. So Patrick has a job coach 25 hours a week. He's been doing this for 13 years now. He uses a switch, and he's got a textured switch, which is different than his other switches. And it's connected to a gooseneck with a pouring cup on the end. And when he hits the switch, the cup pours. So his job coach helps. So what he does is he makes layered ingredient jars that you add the wet ingredients to. So he makes cookie mixes, he makes cornbread and cranberry nut bread, he has a chai, he has a cocoa, birdseed, dog treats. He's up to 22 products. And so his job coach ensures that the ingredients are correct and measured correctly. And as she says, if it's in the jar, Patrick put it there. And the great part is he goes out to the hardware store to buy the mason jars. He goes to the grocery store to buy the ingredients. He goes to the farmer's market to sell them. So it's really quite amazing. He's got a lot of wholesale places throughout the country that he sells, and I'll put in a little plug there because there are a lot of places that are opening up throughout the country that are just staffed by people with disabilities and selling only products by people with disabilities. So we've been busier, you've been busier than we ever expected. It's been really cool.
So I'm going to ask the panel members a question now. So can you think of some examples of ableism, and kind of so in what ways do you feel that people might treat you differently or unfairly because you have a disability? Yeah.
I think of it as the epitome of to devalue and underestimate someone's life because of their disability. Do not love that person, do not invite that person, do not hire that person. That to me is ableism, and it's based on society's idea of what's normal.
I was let go at a job because of my disability. The owner wouldn't show me what to do, and he had other workers, but he let me go because of my disability.
Sorry that happened to you, Lori.
That was Quiznos when it was opened.
I would say just, the most common things I can think of is, people do and can make fun of us and just, call us, bad names. It's just common for us to be left out. And sometimes you may not even know that you're being left out. It happens that frequently. It's something that happens often. You hit on this, like a lot of the buildings do not have ramps or elevators.
Right.
Or I've seen times where, buildings, if they need repair, they don't get repaired as soon as they can. And there's people with disabilities that have to do whatever they can to, sometimes walk down the stairs. It happened in our old office building once. There was something wrong with the elevator and they didn't fix it, as soon as they should have.
And I can't tell you how many electric door pushes don't work throughout the state.
I would say just, other things us, we may notice or not, but, just like you said, a boss can refuse, or a boss refused to hire a person with a disability. You went through the situation where a boss fired you because of your disability, which, I'm sorry to hear. Sometimes just newspapers are printed too small for people with low vision, to read, or you know, just videos without captions, you know, that just leaves people, you know, deaf people out, and just how they can't understand what's going on in the video because there's just no captioning. It's not an option in some cases there.
That's one example I'm thinking of also is just, like, we all went through the flood last July, right? And like, you know, at Green Mountain Self Advocates, we were scrambling because there was boil water notices put out all over the state, but the directions about what to do for a boil water notice were written on like pretty advanced, you know, reading level. It was kind of like you had to be almost in college to be able to read the information. So we like kind of quickly took the information and rewrote it in plain language, which is not only good for people with disabilities, but it's also good for people that, you know, maybe English is not their first language. So a lot of times, we found the same thing during COVID. A lot of the information that was shared, that's the whole notion of people being left out. People just, you know, even government puts out information, or things are made in our society with a certain set of abilities in mind that people read, you know, that people read on a college level, that everybody walks, you know, everybody can hear, everybody can see, and just, so that's that whole notion about people kind of, you know, being left out, you know, so. Can you all I'll let you go ahead, Max, on that one.
I mean, I'm curious to know, like, can you think of examples of ableism that you have witnessed in, you know, the lives of people with disabilities in your family, or who you know, or just maybe in the community, whatever? Any of you? Or you?
I have a lot more examples, sadly, Max. Sadly, I have a lot more examples.
So I have examples. So
I'm
for
sorry,
me,
Tim.
when I was working at a store in Johnston, I don't know if you guys know Willow Mills. There's new ownership now, but the old owner isolated me because of my disability. So.
Sorry that happened to you, Sam.
Well, I was going to say, to me, it's a lot of, I get a lot of pity, to the point where the comment I get probably the most is, you know, people ask about Patrick's disability, and one of the things I say is he's blind, and they say, totally blind? If I had a nickel for every time someone said totally blind, but I just don't understand that. But we owned an inn in Stowe for quite a while, and one of the things that struck me as ableism is we had a guest who said, I'm going to pray for Patrick that he be healed. And I said, no, please don't. He's fine just the way he is. But it was like this person's perception was he needed to be healed. So the other thing that always made me very uncomfortable was people at the inn would often give Patrick money, or they would send him money. And I'm talking like $100 at a time. Now, I always put it towards something to his business, you know, thank you very much. But why? Like, why do you feel the need to give Patrick money? You know, to me, it conjures up the image of the original meaning of handicap, which was I'm holding my cap in hand and I'm begging, which is why I don't like the term handicap. I use the word disability. But you know, it's just like, you know, are you feeling better about yourself because you've donated money to Patrick? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. So we graciously would buy a new easel for his business or a poster board or something for his business and send them a picture with a thank you of it. But it's just, it always made me very uncomfortable. Right, Bud?
I think one of the things I have noticed a lot is people not having the time they need to communicate, to process what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and having that person-centered of, okay, what can I do differently to help in communication? Do you need anything? Do you need me to just maybe shut up? You know, and that's probably one of the biggest things I see. Talking for people, talking over.
Yeah, and to kind of go off on what you said, Katie, one of the things that I see is that a lot of times I think people tend to think, how do I teach somebody with disabilities how to communicate, but what about teaching ourselves how to communicate? So I think there's a lot of just lack of education.
And I think, piggybacking on the communication piece, when someone is nonverbal, there's also often an assumption that they're non-understanding.
Right.
And that's not true. Or, to me, nonverbal does not mean non-communicative. This guy is extremely communicative. So, but people assume there's no thoughts, there's no, and I know there are, so.
We need to learn to listen.
Yes.
And not just with our ears.
Right.
Oh, Patrick, you're funny.
So as, go ahead, I'm sorry. As Rachel started to talk about, so ableism is not just how one person treats another person. Like if being polite to people with disabilities is not gonna fix ableism, okay? Ableism is kind of built into our society, some of our laws, and the programs, just different programs or businesses or just the way our groups or like schools, things like that. The programs we have in our society, they as a whole treat disabled people unfairly. So disabled people don't have the same chances as everyone in life as people without disabilities, and they might be kept apart from people. So my next question for the panel is, can you think of any laws or places in our communities where people with disabilities are treated unfairly? Go for it, Sterling.
Well, the two laws I can think of about this one. One's about the Medicaid system and the unfair wages of working thieves, shelter workshops.
You want me to elaborate on that a little bit?
Right.
Yeah. So there's a part of the Social Security laws in the United States that say it's okay to pay people with disabilities less than minimum wage. So can you imagine if we had a bill and a federal law in the United States that said, people of color, you could pay them less than minimum wage? It's impossible. That would not happen, right? I mean, they may not be paid fairly, but there's not at least a law in the books that says you can do that. Or if somebody was, LGBTQ, they couldn't be paid, that they could be paid less than minimum wage. But we've been trying so long to get this bill, to get this law gone. We're pretty close, but still, here we are, 2024, and there's still a law in the United States that says it's okay to pay people with disabilities less than minimum wage. And some of the places, the shelter workshops, some people are paid like less than $1 an hour for the work that they do. They do a lot of like piecework kind of things. So that's what Sterling was. You've been a long time advocate to get rid of that.
Well, on the second note, we closed shelter workshops in Vermont in 2022.
Yay.
2002.
2002, yeah.
What was closed in 2000?
The shelter workshop in Vermont in 2002.
There used to be like these sweatshops, and there still are throughout the whole country. I mean, not throughout the whole country, but quite a few, more than half of the states in the United States still have shelter workshops, is what they're called. Kind of like sweatshops for people with disabilities.
Enclaves.
Enclaves. This is where people where people with disabilities go and kind of segregated. They're kind of like a mini, like a little factory.
A segregation.
Yeah.
And often the job that they're given is way below the capacity that they have. I think the classic example is the little toys that have the little bubbles in the grocery stores. You put the quarter in and you turn it and the little trinket drops down in a little bubble. Well, that is a job for having moved from the state of Maryland. I can tell you that that was a classic sheltered workshop job. You'd set up your bubble, 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 toy, 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 lid, lid, lid. And that was just like, how would you like to do that 8 hours a day? No, thank you.
Yeah, for less than $1 an hour.
For less than $1 an hour. Yeah.
But there are other places in our community. Mary Ann, maybe you want to talk about the medical system? Or
don't get me started, Topper.
No, I mean, I think that I think it's important to point out that, like, there are these systems, I was using the word program, but I guess we're talking about more systems or places in our society. Well, the way they're set up are discriminate against.
Yeah, and I will jump in on that, Topper, because I finally changed it at, and I won't name names, but at Still Family Practice. We could never get a weight on Patrick. And, you couldn't keep track of his weight. And they told me to take him to a large vet where they have scales for like horses and dogs, and he could roll on there. And I was like, take him where? So that was one example. The other medical example we've had just relatively recently that is, unfortunately, Patrick got quite sick in February and was hospitalized for 20 days. And we had a really frank discussion with a doctor there who was looking towards palliative care because, after all, what's his quality of life? Well, that got nipped in the bud. but this is a doctor who was, well educated yet ready to say, well, it's not worth fighting for because what's his quality of life? And I was like, oh, no. So proceeded to tell him about his quality of life and don't go there with me, like he's got a great quality of life. Don't you, bud?
Yeah, this is the hard part of the conversation, just giving you the examples. But I think it's important for people to know, I mean, I know one of our members who, again, had the same experience where she was told to go to a veterinarian. She uses a wheelchair and a power chair and was told to go to a veterinarian to get weighed. I mean, just what that does to your self-esteem to just have somebody tell you that that's where you can go to get weighed.
I'm pleased to say they now have a Scotty scale, so we've made headway.
Next, do you have some other examples? I know you wanted to talk about schools a little bit.
Oh.
Go, Max, go.
Many schools segregate kids with disabilities. In fact, there was this one program in my school that I was a part of, and I remember seeing an adult woman with autism, and they used unfair punishment on her by making her kneel in a corner for saying something wrong in their opinion.
She's 21 years old.
21 years old. 21 years old. And so that, I witnessed that, and it was bad. I wasn't too happy. But that's an example of some of the unfair punishment of students with disabilities. There's still restraint and seclusion that happens, not just here in Vermont, but throughout the country. I would say, just most doctors' offices are not accessible for people with disabilities still. You know what? And many churches and places of worship are not accessible.
And they're exempt under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Churches don't have to be accessible. Yeah.
Well, I can say my church is trying to change that.
Good. I'm glad
Because
to
we
hear that.
have where you can't get accessibility for some things, but we are trying to get an elevator into our church so people are accessible.
Yeah.
Lori, did you have anything you wanted to add? Can you think of any kind of larger systems? It's fine if you can't. Just
I can't think of anything on top of my head, but
so can we think about as a group? So why does this happen? Why Like, it's kind of like listening to those stories we had in the very beginning. So what's going on, and what are the assumptions that people are making, or what's going on in people's minds that we are making those, what are the reasons behind why people are treated unfairly? What's going on? Let me give you an example, a lot of people with disabilities are taken advantage of, or they are sometimes 3 to 4 times more likely to be abused than somebody without a disability. And sometimes it's because an abuser might think a person is, weak, and they're not going to fight, they're not going to try to stop them from hurting them or abusing them. So people make that assumption, like it's easy to abuse a person with a disability because you're going to get away with it. You're just going to nobody's going to kind of fight you for doing it in some way. Can you think of anybody else think of other things that are going on as to why some of the unfair treatment happens, or?
And that could be emotionally as well. If you have a PTSD or something that was more dramatic.
So it can be hard because the person might be abused their whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or sexual assault.
It's funny that you mentioned that word, because Sterling, one of the things is, when we tell people about abuse, often we are not believed. And also just when it comes to like sex, people don't see us as sexual beings, and people often do not believe anyone would sexually harass people with disabilities. Also, I will say that because people do not see people with disabilities as sexual beings, a lot of the sexual education is literally either not taught at all to us, or just censored from what we should be taught, just as a way of keeping facts away from us, because it's just seen as we're not smart enough to understand that subject and what's going on. And unfortunately, people with disabilities don't have and don't get the proper education around, sexual health. I mean, it's a safety hazard when you don't teach people with disabilities, about that subject, or keep it away from them. And that's one thing that I am aware of when it comes to some of the other ways people with disabilities are treated unfairly and taken advantage of. I mean, other things that come to mind are, many people with disabilities or disabled youth, grow up with a few friends, and they may not have enough experience to know when someone is trying to take advantage of them. And also, just to point out, if for your whole life you were told you were not good enough because you have a disability, you might believe that you deserve to be treated unfairly, or you deserve to be abused. I mean, I call this internalized ableism. Just people with disabilities seeing that they're just not worth, anything, and they deserve whatever bad treatment they get because of that.
Can I interrupt you, Max, real quick? I want to make sure that the harmonious singing over here isn't making it hard for everyone else to hear, or is it distracting anybody, Max? I don't want to distract from anybody, so.
You know what? I will say, as a person on the autism spectrum, I like it when other people basically
Okay.
release energy. in
Okay,
whatever way
I
they
just
can,
want to
and
make
if
sure
that's his
everyone
way
can
of
hear
doing that,
because,
then
yeah,
I
thank you,
totally-
okay. I just want to be respectful because
unless
I've
that's
got
just
somebody
me.
who will take him downstairs and he can make noise in the rest of the library, but but this is Patrick's happiness, as Sam just said, he's really happy.
Yeah.
He really is very happy. I just wanted to make sure we weren't too noisy, too overstimulated. Okay,
Not even.
okay,
Yeah, I don't think anybody's bothered by it.
probably not here.
I'm not.
He has a beautiful voice.
Thank you.
I think also, Max,
Go
something
ahead.
that I know that you've talked a lot about in other situations is that sometimes people with disabilities are reluctant to call the
Oh,
police.
God, yes.
Yeah. Something that I think also happens for people of color in our community too, are reluctant to call the police.
Because they think they're gonna get in trouble, or people believe our confidentiality could be, taken advantage of or violated, or we could get things taken away from us, as if we were in the wrong, if we were to, as a kind of like a punishment, as if we report something that has happened to us badly.
Sometimes people might end up, they're afraid because they have seen it where a person with a disability, it says maybe somebody in their family or something that's abusing them. So then they get taken out of the home and then they might be put in a nursing home or a psychiatric facility. So they're like, whoa, I don't really want to end up there. So even though the situation's not really good where I'm at least I have my own freedom because I'm living in the community. So people are afraid sometimes to report about what's going on because of that, so.
Also, parents are very concerned oftentimes about having to need any support, and the concerns in the media that you see of a child on the spectrum maybe tased or put in handcuffs, and that's a big fear for a lot of parents that I've heard over the years.
Yeah,
Well,
Kate,
for my
oh, go ahead, Sam.
for my brother who has ADHD, he was manhandled because he was so hyper, and then they put him into a February shoot because of it.
And along the lines of worrying about parents' worries, Patrick will do a lot of self-stimulation, and that's why he's got socks on his brakes right now. He goes through different phases, and right now it's rubbing my hand on the brake phase until he actually has skin breakdown, which is why I sometimes put his it seems hard to put a mitten on a visually impaired, totally blind child, but it's for his safety. He'll scratch himself, and I worry people are going to think I scratched him. So it's a worry. I mean, I've filmed some of his self-injures episodes so that I can say, nope.
And now if somebody has a mental health crisis, they call mental health, somebody that's on a mental health services to come and help deal with a person that is having a difficult time. So they will get mental health involved, a caseworker or somebody.
Do you think that's a better thing?
Yeah, because the police are not really trained on handling somebody with a disability because of years ago where a guy got shot because he was having a mental health crisis because they didn't know he had a disability. So now they get mental health involved. I don't know anywhere else, but I know Morrisville or Lamoille County, every time I hear on the scanner, we need somebody from mental health to come and help with a situation.
And I will say that there's a lot of training to do so that mental health and neurodevelopmental disorders can also kind of cross, and that is something that.
Yeah, because I did twice a mental health first aid at Lamoille County Mental Health, and there were some officers, I know a state trooper was there and a few other people that I This was like years ago.
You know, it's funny that you're mentioning all of this. I'm actually part of work on one on a state level and one on a national level. I'll talk about the state one first quickly, but I'll talk both of them quickly. But I have the honor of doing a class for new recruits every 6 months at the Vermont State Police Academy, and I bring the perspective of disability in that class on how police officers should better communicate and interact with people with disabilities, also experiencing mental health conditions. And on a national level, I do kind of the same thing. I'm part of a curriculum that is being worked on that will give guidance to police officers throughout the country on how to better interact with people with disabilities, also with mental health conditions. I was just in Massachusetts back in December, and I did a training with a few other people, class down there, to prosecutors and police officers on that subject. And I do hit on the fact that, you know, there needs to be more training, better training in police departments throughout the country, and why, coming from the disability and mental health perspective.
I love that you do that next. That's
Yeah.
just wonderful.
I heard a statistic like 5 or 10 years ago, and I can't cite where it's from, but it's really a very upsetting statistic about police, people who get killed by police, and that it's well over 50% of people with disabilities. I don't know if anyone knows an updated number, and it's like, it's hard to even say it out loud, but I think it's I wish I could like say an accurate number and cite it, because I think it's really valuable for people to know that, because it can be motivating to help make a change.
I think that's what we can do. We can, even with the people that are filming here, we can share some resources that are, you know, pretty easy to kind of look at the statistic. I don't have them with me either. So, you know, Max, I know you talk about, there's this word that a lot of people are talking about intersectionality, you know, about how, you know, sometimes when, I know you've told me, like, sometimes if you're experiencing discrimination, you don't know if it's because you're a black man or.
Because I'm autistic.
Yeah, not really knowing where it's coming from, where the people are discriminating against you, so, yeah.
I think there should be a training, especially with the police, about people with autism, because if they're nonverbal and they can't communicate, so there should be more training on that.
You know, Lori, that's the next direction of question that we're going to is just, so how do you want people to respond to you if something comes up that you've been treated unfairly? How do you want people to interact with you? How do you want people to respond to you? What could be helpful?
I gotta think.
You gotta think.
I gotta think.
I gotta think too. I think, Topper, I try to handle it kind of one person at a time, and try to educate one person at a time. I think one thing that I see a lot with Patrick is that once people, you know, they look at his eyes and then they ask the question, is he blind? And then I get the totally blind, and then they start shouting at him. And I'm like, you know, because he can't see, it doesn't mean he can't hear. His hearing is quite good. But so I generally try to say to people, you know what, he's blind, not deaf. Please don't shout at him, because it happens all the time. So I just, you know, I try to use that as an example of training people one at a time.
Sterling, you have any suggestions?
Take one piece of action and advocate for yourself. Or talk to someone like you, Sebastian group. See what if they can help you with.
So connecting with the disability rights movement in some way? Yeah. It's a good suggestion. I mean, I think the biggest thing is just believing people, just giving people the benefit of the doubt. I know it sounds kind of obvious, but I think it's really an important thing to remember, especially if somebody's telling you that they're being treated unfairly, to take it seriously and try to
And one thing,
listen. Yeah.
one thing, Topper, that I feel is almost an advantage for us is that Patrick's disability is quite visible. I think it's very tough, and I don't know because I haven't been in that position, but I would imagine it would be very challenging and very tough for people whose disability isn't obvious.
Yeah, that's tough on me.
And so I think, you don't realize how much help that person might need, what support they need. You don't even ask, you just assume you're not doing a good job, and off you go. And so I sometimes worry about my friends who have the non-visible disability.
Yeah, there's sometimes when I'm at work or used to be, like they didn't think I know what I was doing, and it's like there's this disability, and it means I don't know what I'm doing. So yeah, it's really hard.
I think I hear what the both of you are saying. I think there's pros and cons to both. I think
Oh, sure.
there's a con. I think the con of having a disability that is invisible or not noticeable at first is people assume that you don't need support in anything, and they may not give you the help that you deserve. And then there is, the challenge of having a disability that is more noticeable. People just may look, at that and not look beyond your strengths. The way I kind of heard this on TV once, but I think it's like with an invisible disability, people tend not to see the struggles. And with visible disabilities, people tend not to see the strengths.
And that's exactly right. People will categorize people with disabilities as high functioning or low functioning. And it's like, what is our measurement here? And if you're putting someone in a low functioning category, then that's where you're putting your expectations for them.
Which is why I despise that.
Oh, I despise that. That to me is the epitome of ableism.
We just put it, like you said before, Katie, about putting people in a box, like I always tease Max, I always say, so what does your mother say? Does your mother say you're high functioning or low functioning when it comes to keeping your room neat and making your bed every day? Like how do you just have one label you put on somebody that just across the board saying what they can or cannot do? So, Sure. We've had troubles when we tried to do education of doctors because it's a quick fix for them, like to have a label like that so that they only going to have, 15 minutes with somebody. And so they like to have those kind of quick labels. So they kind of push back on us a bunch saying like, we don't really, like that label's helpful for us. We want to keep that label, and we're like saying, but it's not telling you what the person can or cannot do.
Exactly.
It's not descriptive, so not really that. It actually, in the long run, it's not very helpful for the person. For sure. I mean, I think another big thing is that we want people to respond. We want people to speak up when you see something. Our society's so much kind of people have blinders on when we see things going on just to, to say something.
Especially when they park in the hash marks of the disabled parking place. Please tell them they shouldn't be doing that. I want to lower the lift van right on their roof. Haven't done that yet.
Or you see people parking in a handicap that's
Or they're not.
Although I've learned to be careful about that because then you get into the invisible disabilities because you might have MS and still be ambulatory but not have a long stamina, or you might have a cardiac condition. I used to be very sensitive to that, but now I'm trying to contain my comments.
One vehicle that was parked in the handicapped at Cumberland Farms, and I didn't see a handicap sign on their plate, But
or
then,
on their window.
but I did see one of those markers on placards on their mirror. So, or neither one is on there because somebody's like a young. I don't know, but
Yes, I've seen it happen too, where if you don't have the placards or on your license plate, and it's like, why are you even there? You don't have any markers.
or a person with a client, how they treat them badly. If they're not, like if they have a hard time walking, they'll like
Push them.
push them or pull them to go. I've seen it plenty of times. I don't say anything.
Well, we're trying to encourage people to say something, for sure, yeah. But I can understand it can feel like people might get mad at you for sure, Lori, you know, if you do say something,
And
I'm sure.
I see stuff too, but I don't say anything because I mean, I don't know, I don't want to be yelled at for protecting the person.
I haven't seen anything happen from our agency.
No, but I've seen it in
there's-
other places, and I just don't say anything because I don't want them to tell me to mind my own business or.
Well, it wouldn't be one suggestion, we would, if it feels safe, like you're saying, it doesn't feel safe for you to speak up, but if the situation does feel safe to speak up, or to find somebody else that you can talk to and tell them so that the two of you can be, you know, have a more powerful voice.
A natural support.
Exactly, thank you, Sterling, for that. So let's turn it open, I want to open it up a little, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was
Mary.
gonna say, I think I will say something, I think probably everyone up here would agree, that the use of the R word is probably the most offensive
Yes.
thing in the world. And so I will nip that right in the bud.
I do it sometimes.
You know, sometimes I read a book and it's in there and I'm like, okay, that's it, I'm done with that book, I'm not reading that, you know, and I just, so, you know, I think it depends on the situation, but I think sometimes I just can't stay quiet.
No,
I
as soon as
have
the
to say
R word, I
something.
would book it up and say
Yeah.
that's not okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that example.
I think when we were in Indianapolis, didn't they have a movie about the R?
Yes. Yes, they did.
It's the same with like you ride on the short bus, you know, that's not acceptable. You don't say that.
So I want to open it up to everybody now. So, you know, what do we want our neighbors or coworkers to do to include people with disabilities? Like, what suggestions do you all have about being a good ally if you're a person without a disability? Or, you know, what can we do to kind of get people to be more welcoming and to be more aware of what ableism is? Do you have any ideas or suggestions?
I think it's just conversations. Talk about it, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. Maybe, you know, role play different scenarios. I would like to think that everybody in our line of work doesn't ever do anything intentional, but sometimes we can say something without intending to offend somebody just because we don't know. Or it's out of what we're used to doing, so I think just having those conversations and educating each other and listening is going to be helpful. A step in the right direction at least.
I think for me, it's like walking the talk. I really try to get Patrick out in the community. Would it be easier to leave him at home? Yes. Would that be the right thing for either one of us? No. And like his business is a perfect example. He goes to all the markets. He goes to the craft shows. And I use it as a moment of advocacy because a lot of people, I've had one person tell me, well, that's a good gimmick to sell things. I said, it is not a gimmick. This is his business. But, you know, that's how the world thinks. And so, you know, I have a big poster that describes and has a picture of his pouring device. And here's Patrick doing adaptive skiing. And here he is doing sit-down paddleboarding. And here he is in the water. And, you know, here's a beach wheelchair. And so, because people don't realize there's opportunities out there. So I just kind of turn everything into a teachable moment and advocate, like, on a daily basis. Right, Bud?
I think people need to be told to take time
Yeah.
to get to know people. Because we all have things we struggle at, we all have things we're good at. But we can all learn from each other.
Right, because we're disability doesn't mean we're not a person. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean you're not really a person. I mean, we all probably have disability you guys never know about, every one of us.
I have a learning disability.
I know we're saying there's some people out there that
Yeah.
don't know it, they have disability, so they shouldn't be judging, 'cause they could have it.
I think having examples, I love the example of the company Hetty Topper, in our community here. And they have employed a number of people that have intellectual developmental disabilities. And I remember when COVID was ending and it was at not ending, because it's not ended, but when it was calming down a little bit. And I remember some of the employees that live in this community that were eager to get back to work at Hetty Toppers, and because people were still drinking beer, even though COVID was amongst us. But I remember that some people didn't have like their job support people ready to go back to take them back to work, and their coworkers were like, "I'll give you a ride. We need you to come back to work."
They're beyond
And
supportive. Yep.
that company is just really,
Yep. They really do
very
it right.
public and has a video about how it's changed and how much it's really benefited their community at Hetty Topper to be able to include people with disabilities as their coworkers, So,
To the
so I think
point,
having those examples,
to the point where I'm also on the board of Green Mountain Adaptive Sports, and Hetty Topper, the Hetty Trotter in the fall, which is their run, they always make sure there's accommodations. And they always contact us at Green Mountain Adaptive Sports, and how can we accommodate this athlete to participate? And they do it right. 24/7, yeah.
I have a quick example about being an example in the community. Max knows the story. Max and I were out with a former police officer at the conference in Massachusetts, and we went to a restaurant. And there was a person kind of in an alcove. Remember the old man who was yelling at him? We came out of the restaurant, and there was a person who might be unhoused. He was yelling at, what was his name? Our police officer?
You gotta hear this. His name was Mike.
Mike was my name. And he was yelling
I'll tell
at
you what he
Mike,
said.
and Mike is amazing, this former police officer. And he engaged with him, and he diffused him, and he treated him like a person. And after about 5 minutes, they were just chatting, and this person, I don't know if this person, the last time anybody treated him with respect and as a person, Mike was just perfect with him, and he had a lot of experience with that. But that was a great example of being an example for other people, how to treat someone who might have a disability or might be disadvantaged or.
I think we have one in Morrisville that does that too. Cause I know, cause one of my homewriters' friend is a policeman, and he's awesome. He's a sweet guy, so. He's retiring. It's the only thing that sucks about he's retiring. It's like, are you kidding me?
It is one of those things though where it's just so easy for society to like look at or see somebody without really knowing them and just make this assumption that they're bad when really they may be struggling on the inside, or they are struggling on the inside. You never know why somebody may come across you like in a certain way. But again, I think having that, open mind and just like getting to know somebody will definitely like change that. I mean, I think I see this with, I think with people that are unhoused, I think, it's always, there's like this assumption that they're mean and they're just not happy. Maybe they are unhappy, but for good reason, but they're not terrible people. I mean, I've had people that are unhoused or experiencing having no homes, basically, say hi to me. And, they're just human. They're just probably struggling and they are struggling in life, but it's just so easy to not, when you don't have that open mind, it's easy to jump to an assumption that it's not good about that person.
I know I don't want to be judged on my worst day that I ever had. And I probably exhibit some pretty harsh behaviors. So I don't want to judge anybody else on the worst day either. And I think that that's that human part that we need to instill more. For somebody with a disability, it's written about over and over again what their worst day could look like. And that's hard. And I don't like that.
And I think I kind of keep the mindset when thinking about other people. It's kind of like, there but for the grace of God go I. You know, any one of us could be in a horrific accident and become brain injured on the way home tonight. You know, we could have a stroke. We could get diagnosed with MS or cancer. You know, any one of us could have a heart attack. Any one of us could have a life-changing disability at any time. And, you know, so I think in that regard, it gives me hopefully a greater empathy for everybody. So.
You know, it's funny you said that. It kind of reminds me of when we had somebody come into our local advocacy group and talk to us about people that have no homes. And one of the things they said was homelessness. This is what he said. Homelessness can happen to anybody.
At any time. Yep.
Anytime.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, and so I took that in perspective, and I'm like, if people are going to judge individuals with disabilities, anybody could be disabled or have a disability.
Or unhoused.
Yeah.
So I think if we can think about, you know, when we see things in our community, you know, figuring out a way to say something about it or to do something about it. When you hear of campaigns where people are like, we're all trying to get rid of the federal law that says you can pay people with disabilities sub-minimum wage, although all of our delegation is in favor of getting rid of that, you know, passing new legislation to get rid of that. But those restrictions. But I think also if we can start thinking about, you know, kind of like being able to highlight the examples in our community where people are being inclusive and being able to, you know, they just are realizing the richness that they get from their community groups or their organizations or their businesses about how they are including people with all different kinds of abilities. I think that would be some of the steps that we hope we can leave people with to try to focus on.
Also, they need to change the law with Social Security, or when you receive SSI or Social Security, that you're not penalized for working. Because when you work a certain amount of hours, they take what you make, deduct a certain amount, and then if they overpay you, then you have to pay back an overpayment. So that's why I don't work, because I had to pay back an overpayment, and it took me 18 months to pay it back. Well, I've had several overpayments, and I'm like, nope, not dealing with this anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of a challenge for people that have to rely on benefits just for their basic needs, but then when they try to get out of that situation.
They asked me if I was planning on going back to work, and I'm like, nope. I said, so you can take my money away?
There's not even a graduated program.
Yeah.
Things have gotten more expensive.
Yeah, sure. Well, there are ways. There are different
Incentives.
Yeah, there are different incentives that. I think that the problem is the particular program that Lori was on, the SSI. That program is pretty restrictive. Some of the other disability benefit programs, the rules have gotten a little bit better due to advocacy for sure. So.
Yeah, I have to be careful how much I make, because otherwise I will be charged.
Does anybody have any questions for anyone here? No, we want to thank you very much for being here today. And
All right.
I just want to thank you all for being here, for highlighting your experiences, what you've seen. It's really powerful.
thanks.
I forgot to actually mention this about, I think it was one of the questions in the previous, if I could do it, but I think like it had to do with like people with disabilities being treated unfairly. I think it goes into that, but one thing that I have heard is when autism is talked about, sometimes like even just in the community, but I've also heard it like sometimes during, you know, sometimes from politicians. I've heard the word epidemic used when people say, like, talk about autism, and that honestly hits a nerve in me because it implies that people with autism or autistic people are like mentally sick and need to be cured. And I just don't know if people are aware on that level of how impactful that is. I've heard some people on the campaign trail say that about autism, and I'm like, we need to talk to them about what that really means to us.
And what does it mean to you, Max?
It means like my autism is seen as some menace to society, as if it's like a virus taking over the country or the world. Because I'm more used to hearing epidemic or even pandemic when you talk about something like COVID or like the flu or something, but when you say that about autism or disabilities, it just implies that we need to be cured, because if we're not, then we're taking over, we're exterminating the planet in a bad way and ruining everybody else's lives. And I just think it's awareness of language and also just your context.
So thank you, everybody, on that note. But if we can hold on to those examples, the positive examples where people really included, I think that's really when you were talking. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Sonia. So Sonia, I think when you talked about that, I think that's a great one to hold on to, you know, just in terms of having the examples, you know, to be able to share with other people so people know what it looks like when we have true inclusion in our communities.
And testimonials.
And testimonials, yes, for sure. All right. So thank you very much, everybody. All right.